Anita, how's your mental health?
Questionable at all times. You know this.
Yeah, how's the mental health of your children?
Also a little bit tricky. Can I tell you my experience in trying to find therapists for myself and my kids, Mel?
Yes, please.
Okay, this is how it goes. You ask around your friends and your family for a referral for somebody who's nearby. You finally find somebody who sounds like they might work for your family. You give them a call and you find out that A, they're not accepting new patients, or B, they have a huge wait list. So you start over again and you ask people if they know anybody who would be a good therapist and a good fit. Finally, you find one, you go and you meet with them and you figure out that you don't actually like them that much. But it's been so much work to find somebody who you can go to in your area that you're kind of stuck with them. Well, do you have any ideas for how to get around this?
I do, because guess what? I've actually had some therapists that I have found on my own, which involves what you're saying. Sometimes I remember one time I was like 3 hours in the bathtub on my phone looking
Yeah.
through websites. I was such a prune at the end. But I have also had the experience with working with BetterHelp. And it was like, I don't want to say too good to be true, but because it is true, but it's like amazing because I was matched with my therapist within 24 hours.
And you didn't have to go through all of that other ridiculous process of trying to find somebody. And here's the cool thing too, is if that person didn't work out for you, you can just switch and say, and it's not like you're committing to another years long search for somebody who you're going to jive with.
It's true. And I lucked out, or maybe just BetterHelp is really good at matching people together because I never had to change my therapist. I loved her. Perfect fit for me. And I know that some of our friends have used BetterHelp and they've had to change therapists, and boom, same day, you can change.
Easy peasy.
You can ghost your therapist. Get a new one.
I love this idea. BetterHelp is one of our sponsors. If you use our promo code trybetterhelp.com/WWDN, you get 10% off your first month. And we totally recommend it.
Yes, get some therapy. That's trybetterhelp.com/WWDN.
Hello, Melonius.
Hello, Anatonialus correct. Hello, Anita Coilus. Wait. Correct. Hello, Anita atomically correct. That took a while.
Oh, Mel. That was hard.
I'm on some heavy drugs right now for my migraine. This is going to be entertaining. I've already been a disaster dropping things.
Mel told me she was double drugged. And I was like, that sounds nice.
So have your fun. Have your fun now.
Well, you won't remember any of it.
Mm-hmm.
Mel, here we are again. The end or the beginning of another week.
Still alive.
Still alive. We went to church today, Mel. And I'm just having one of those days where I feel like I am failing everything.
Crap!
Yeah.
Why? I think, by the way, this is not helpful for you, but I have witnessed you in mayhem, and you don't even resort to alcohol, and I think you're my hero.
Or double drugs.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. We rolled into church. We were a little bit late, had a big fight with one of the kids before church. We got there. One of them didn't even have shoes. They look like homeless people. And then they're like loud and noisy. I'm just like, blah.
You're like over it now.
I'm just having one of those days where you feel like none of this is worth it. Everybody just leave me alone.
Well, and this week you had 2 kids gone and 2 kids home, and now they're all 4 back. And you've driven to Idaho twice by yourself.
Which is amazing. For those who don't know, it's amazing.
And you didn't fall asleep.
I did not crash the car.
Could
and
fatigue
I made it.
be contributing to how you're feeling right now?
Of course. And not just fatigue from the week, but fatigue from being a widow for 2.5 years and doing this all by myself for all of this time and getting them ready for church every week and brushing their teeth every night and doing all the work stuff and doing the laundry and mowing the lawn and podcast and, your day job and all that kind of stuff. It's just like, ah!
Anita, I'm really sorry.
It's okay. It's not okay, but it's okay.
I'm sorry I can't do anything about it. That's what sucks.
Right. And nobody can do anything about it because I need my other parent to help me. And to even just tell me, like, you're doing a good job. But not just saying that, because people can just say that, but they don't really understand. But Jason knew our kids, so he could be like, no, you're actually doing a good job. And I would believe him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. Anita, I'm really sorry that I am not a sufficient co-parent for you and that I don't share DNA with your children so that I can understand in the same way. And I'm sorry that Jason is dead.
Thank you. Mel, I'm proud of you this week, though.
Why?
Because you agreed to go somewhere and do something
you guys,
with somebody.
I know. Here's what's happening. Now, anybody that listens to our podcast consistently probably heard me be like, yes, I feel like I'm doing great and I'm making great strides. And then the next week, tank. And so I've continually been kind of trying to climb up from this most recent tank. And that's why grief is so dumb. It's not predictable. And then I feel so frustrated when I do have those tanks that it's like it adds another layer onto just trying to do the everyday. But I have been able to intentionally notice where I'm not doing well and intentionally try and plan things or say yes to things that might put a little kink in my normal plans in a good way. So actually, I've been very social this week for me.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I got together with some friends and we had so much fun and we played some games. We had a brunch and that was really fun. I really enjoyed that. And that's my comfort group because it's people in our situation, right?
Right.
That's a lot more comfortable than the real world, which is hilarious to say because like normal people being the real world, whatever. But I did get invited to go with some friends boating and I said yes.
Which I was like, what? I mean, just the fact that you said yes is kind of a big deal and we should ring bells and like clap.
I know. When that happened, I was like, Mel, if you are really trying to up-level your life and kind of pull yourself up another little step from the pit of despair, you need to be aware that this is something you can say yes to and you might not die. And also it might help you to, deal with what you're dealing with. So I texted Anita and I said, Anita, I've done something crazy. And I can't remember what you said.
I probably said, what did you do?
You probably said, did you order that sloth swing again from China? I said,
Probably.
No, I got invited to go boating and I said yes. She was totally actually completely shocked.
I was, because usually you're like, no.
So guess what? Yesterday comes. I have the first part of the day with my friends, had a great time. And I was like, well, I did tell this person that I could go boating and I can still back out anytime I want. And I probably might default to that, but I'm not going to. And I'm just going to go because I said I would go and I'm trying. And guess what happened? It got rained out. But let's have a moment of silence or a moment of loudness that I said I would go. And that it's not my fault that it didn't happen. It was the weather.
Yeah. I feel like that was actually the perfect ending for you because it was like you said yes, that was uncomfortable. You didn't just automatically back out. That was uncomfortable. And then you didn't even have to go. So it was like the universe was smiling down upon you. Although you probably would have had fun boating, don't you think?
Yeah, and here's the thing. Like, my whole life, I grew up boating. I love boating. I love doing the things. There are some things that I really have loved doing in my whole entire past that now when I get to them, it's like I've had the time and the space and probably subconscious trauma to be like, is this going to upset me in grief? Is this going to make me actually feel like I'm living and then I'm going to have to process that? Oh, yeah. I know I would have had a good time. I was stoked to wake surf because that's been something I've wanted to do. But I consider it a victory.
I do too.
And my friend that invited me like knows he's not a stranger to like difficult things. So I'm like, okay, I'll go with you. And my other friend was going to maybe go. So yeah.
Mel.
What?
I just have to say this, you can take it out, but you didn't want to go do something like that because you didn't want to rock the boat.
Nita, that was a great dad joke.
You're welcome.
See, you're a mom and a dad.
Speaking of grief being weird, the Olympics are going on, right? And I love to watch the Olympics. And I love to watch weird sports that you never get to watch any other time. You know, like handball and synchronized swimming, although they changed the name of synchronized swimming. Did you know that?
Yeah.
It's now called artistic swimming.
Ooh.
Anyway, I was watching that and I had one of those grief bombs because it was like, you know, Jason was a swimmer. So watching the different swim events, and I just wanted to like cheer with him because he would have been so stoked to watch all of those events, and just feeling that loss and that absence of him in that strange place that I didn't really expect to feel those feelings. And then feeling annoyed that all the sports I'm watching are stressing me out and then we're losing. Ugh, it's no good.
I haven't watched anything, but I am aware of the Simone Biles situation. And I'd like to say thank you, Simone Biles, for on the most public forum possibly that there is in the world, you took a stance for your mental health. Widows, widowers, grievers, people that just have brains that struggle in life, which is everybody. This should give you a nice little jolt that if you are struggling and you need to take time out for yourself because you are not safe, it's okay.
I saw a little meme and it was like, if Simone Biles could withdraw from the Olympics, you can skip a dinner party. Something along those lines.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah. There's been a lot of opinions, and, you know, especially in the United States because she's from the United States. But, really interesting to see people. And of course, I have mixed feelings about everything. And I just feel like this is another one of those and situations. Like, you can be disappointed that she didn't compete, and you can be proud of her for doing what was safe for her.
Totally.
And, you know, so it's not all cut and dry.
Isn't the situation that she's experiencing some like dissociation from her body? That's something that gymnasts deal with typically. And it's like she's not landing stuff. I mean, my gosh, look, like what if you're doing a flip on the balance beam? You're paralyzed. Who cares about the stupid Olympics? Like, how about let's just not get paralyzed, and good job for not plowing through in this situation if it's something that potentially would cause you forever harm. Permanent harm.
I love the name of it. They call it the twisties.
Yeah.
I've got the twisties. I feel like we should have the griefies or something like that. I've got the griefies.
Sounds like
I can't
shingles.
go to the dinner party. The shingles. Almost the same.
Oh, man. Well, we can do this. Sometimes we don't feel like we can, and maybe we can't. Maybe maybe what our best is can change from day to day. Like some days it's just acknowledging that we're not doing okay, and that's the best we can do that day. And sometimes the best we can do is we get out and we go to the store, or sometimes we drive to Idaho twice a week and we continue to mom. And that's, I think, is amazing. My gosh.
I did something I was proud of myself for this week, and it's going to sound so stupid, but it was such a big deal for me. My son had a birthday party on Saturday, and on Thursday, I said to myself, we need to go get a birthday present for his friend. I thought ahead. I know.
Anita!
Most normal people do that. And so I was so proud of myself because usually I get to the 5 minutes before. Crap. But I was like, yay, winning. I thought ahead. And then I had to take him to the store and buy a birthday present, which is the worst.
I think that you're exhausted from making great strides.
I know that one little step.
No, that's huge. Oh, my gosh.
It's one small step for, geez.
I've been listening to John Ramsey's book called The Other Side of Suffering. And for those that don't know, it's John Benet Ramsey's dad. And it's amazing. I love it. I've been following that murder case since, it happened.
Since it happened.
In the 90s, and they were wrongfully accused. The media played a big part in it, and lots of sad situations. And John Bonet was not his first child to die. He had his oldest daughter that was killed in a car wreck a few years before.
I knew that.
Yeah, and before John Bonet was killed, her mom had ovarian cancer. It went in remission throughout the whole wrongfully accused thing. Then it came back. She died. John Ramsey's a widower, y'all. Anyway, he has such great life experience. I mean, it's horrible life experience, but good things to say. And so many things, of course, resonated. And for those of you who are interested in another book or audiobook to read, go check it out. John Ramsey, The Other Side of Suffering. He's 77 now. He is remarried, but I think at the time of writing the book, he was not. But I mean, if anyone's gone through it, he's like been stripped of everything. What's hard for me is I did not cause Scott to die, and I have to put all the effort forth toward my own healing, and no one else can do it. And I'm tired. And so now as I'm still clawing my way up, it's nice to hear other grievers' story, especially to that magnitude. It's wild. So check it out, y'all.
Mel.
Yes.
Should people join the Widow Wives Club?
I mean, only if you want to hang out with us and be our friend and connect with like-minded people and share memes and share sorrows and everything in between. And I think we're pretty fun.
If you're a widow or widower or you have experienced partner loss, no matter your sexual orientation or your marital status, come join us in the Widow Wives Club. It's a super supportive group. It's on Facebook. The links are all over the place on Instagram, on Facebook. Just make sure you answer all the questions and agree to the rules. We really won't let you in if you don't submit all of the things. So come and join us. It's a great group.
We're full of a lot of different types of widows and widowers, even people that have remarried or have started dating again or are not wanting to date or all of the things. So everybody's welcome that has experienced partner loss at some point in their life.
Yes. So come join us there. And if you want to keep the podcast going, the best way you can do that is to join our Patreon. And Patreon is a website that allows audiences to connect with the people who create content, podcasters, other types of artists, and support them in a way that allows them to keep doing what they're doing. So if you want to help support the podcast, go to patreon.com/WWDN.
We have 4 tiers, and you get different things with each tier. The starting tier is $5 per month. How many Starbucks is that, Anita?
1/4.
1/4 of a Starbucks for the entire month. So if you're interested in checking that out, please consider that. One of the perks on a few of our Patreon levels are shout outs within the episode, which we will get to in a second. And we also have input into episodes, Q&A, and things like that. Go check it out. There's a lot.
So we're going to do our Patreon shout out right now.
All right, let's get to it. Our first patron is our secret dead husband, who says...
Shoot, I thought you were going to say something.
I'm on drugs. Are you kidding?
No, I thought it was going to be really good. All we are saying is give the widows a chance.
Anita, you're such a good solo artist.
I have not taken any voice lessons ever. I know you guys are going to be surprised about that.
Shocker.
Okay, next we have Constance Dahlbach.
Happy birthday, David Kelly.
Don Satterwhite.
Ivan the Misner. Woohoo, Ivan. Kicking
Kat.
it. Amy.
Amy Sapp.
Ashley Hahn.
Christina Shiflett.
Danielle Catterberg.
Not a Debbie Downer.
But also a Dennis Brazo.
Jenny Taylor.
Jenny Wang.
Kathy Murray.
Werewolf Bar Mitzvah. Kirsten Stromberg.
Sometimes we assume that unless we had a huge life insurance payout, we don't really need to know anything about investments or even finances. But guess what? A little knowledge of finances is critical for all of us. Maybe your partner was in charge of that stuff, and now you find yourself making all the decisions. Maybe you're mad about that. Maybe I am. Nicole from the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast is here to help. She tackles financial literacy by telling the stories of women and widows and finance experts and shares the lessons they've learned as certified financial planners. Whether you know a lot and feel confident in your financial decisions or feel unsure about all of that stuff, there is more to learn. Listen and subscribe to the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast on all podcast platforms. This ad was paid for by Rockhouse Financial, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Laura Bradbury,
Leslie Webb,
Missy Schubert,
the socialite, Rachel Barbosa,
woo woo, Sarah Morris,
my mom,
Karen Cornejo,
Anna Tracy,
Christina Scambato,
Christine Anderson,
Mindy Holmgren,
Don Barber,
Diana Becker,
Emily Thornton,
Emily Toledo,
Aaron Posick,
Gabe Lozano,
Ian Cini,
Ilianabel Ruiz,
Jacinda Coelonios,
Jamie Aliota,
Jane, the heir of the Randall fortune,
Jenny Barrow. Actually, they just did their will and their trust. It's 180 pages long because it's not because they have lots of stuff. Jenny Barrow,
Jocelyn Milo,
Joy Kirsch, the fancy lady,
Katie Radcliffe,
Kara Provitt,
Lori Farrington,
Marie Hoffman,
Marjorie Lewis,
Mary McGowan,
Peter Rukavina,
Sarah Kennedy,
Sunshine Haven,
Tammy Schwartz,
Sarah Wallace,
Valerie Packer,
and
Velour
Tracksuit Wendy.
Did you rub your thighs when you said that?
Ew!
You have to rub velour. It's a thing. Thank you to all of our patrons. Thanks for helping us to keep the podcast going. We'd love to see more of you join us in the Patreon, but we love you no matter what.
Please, 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 if you have not already, please consider writing us a review on iTunes. It helps us to be more visible to widows and to help more grievers. And if this podcast has been helpful to you and you have not yet done that, please consider doing it. It's free.
And if you're having trouble figuring it out, let us know. We'll help coach you through it. We'll even tell you the words to say.
Yeah. Here, let's hit pause right now. 1, 2, 3, pause.
Pause.
Okay, we're back.
That was quick.
Now, if you want to buy us some tacos, we actually do go get tacos and eat them. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/widowwedonoww.
And if you're in need of some counseling, Mel is one person who will tell you that betterhelp.com is amazing. We have a unique code to use for 10% off your first month. You can get therapy wherever, whenever, even in your pajamas, even in your bathrobe. So that's trybetterhelp.com/WWDN.
They have a ton of resources. They also offer financial aid for those who are in need. So please consider checking it out because if you are a widow, you have a brain, you need some help with your brain.
Excellent. Shall we get to the episode, Mel?
We shall.
Let's do it. I'm Anita.
I'm Mel.
We are two young widows trying to figure out
Widow.
We
Do.
now. This episode is brought to you by the Misner Family Foundation in memory of Elisabeth Misner. We have a special guest today. It's always a special guest, but this one's a special guest.
A special guest that we learned about
special.
from one of our friends. We have a mutual widower friend in common. Thanks, David Kelly.
Yes, David Kelly.
If you're familiar with our podcast, you're probably familiar with Jenny's podcast because there's not, let's face it, there's not a million widow podcasts in the world, like every other topic. But today we have Jenny Lisk with us. Hi, Jenny.
Hey, Anita. Hi, Mel.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've really been looking forward to this.
We see each other on the interwebs and on Instagram and everything, but this is the first time that we've all had a chance to chat. So it's so nice to meet you.
Yes, you guys too. And I don't know yet if I'm going to meet you in person at Camp Widow. I hear you're going to be there and presenting, so it's very exciting. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Are you going to be there?
Well, I don't know. I hope
TBD.
to. Yeah, if I can work it out with, this and that and, being a parent. I would love. Yes, I did go to Camp Widow, I should say, back in 2016. And it was about 5 months after my husband died. And I took both kids because it was the first year they had their kids program in San Diego. And I went to that. It was terrific. Met a lot of great people, interesting workshops, just great to be there, with people who get it. It was just really, so if anybody's listening and they haven't been, I definitely encourage you to consider it. And of course they do one in Toronto and they do one in Florida. And I don't know the dates of those right now. But there are several opportunities, each year. And if it doesn't work this year, next year, they do it every year.
What's it like for the kids?
Well, I don't know if it's changed because the year that we were there was the very first time they did the kids program. But it was a separate program from the adults program. So it was like, downstairs, it's in a big fancy hotel, right? So they have all the ballrooms and the conference rooms. And then there was a room for the kids program. And I think they had a younger kids group and a teenagers group. And it was a mix of like some grief stuff, sharing and meeting other kids who had a dead dad or a dead mom, right? And then it was like, let's all go to the baseball game. It's what's San Diego, the Padres or somebody? The professional team. So they had tickets one night. They walked over to the stadium because I think the hotel was close enough they could, go to the ball game. And there was nothing grief there. It was just like, let's get hot dogs and let's watch the ball game. And they did, I think, something on a boat or, they did stuff like fun stuff. And then they mixed in grief stuff. So I think it's nice that they do that because it's, if someone who's a parent wants to go, that might or might not work if they have kids at home. They might have grandparents or friends to leave them with. They might not. So I think it's a great option that they have that.
Yeah, I didn't even realize they did that until it was too late. Otherwise, maybe I would have sent my kids with Mel.
Nope. I'm the fun aunt.
Jenny, where are you recording from?
I am in Redmond, Washington, which is just outside Seattle.
Okay. I did one of my internships in Seattle, so I was there for like 2 months.
Oh, nice.
I ate a lot of cheese at Beecher's Cheese.
I
knew how to get on the bus and go there, and that was like the only thing I did.
Right. Yeah. Good. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit of your backstory, how you became a widow, and the story surrounding that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. It was 6 years ago right now that we were just in the thick of all of this. So it was in May of 2015, and my husband, Dennis, he started feeling a little dizzy. It was just like I came home from something and he had a funny look on his face. What's wrong? Thinking like he was kind of like pissed off about something, right? I thought he had a bad day at work. I didn't expect him to say, I'm feeling a little dizzy. But he wasn't passing out. He wasn't falling over. He wasn't, nothing weird, just a little dizzy, right? I started to notice this subtle confusion. Even starting then, I went out to get some takeout food, came back, and I'm like, how you doing? How you feeling? Right? Like my can do was kicking in, right? And he looks at me and he says, oh, I'm fine. But, I've been feeling a little dizzy lately. And the way he said, I stopped and I looked at him. And I was like, okay, am I overreading this situation? Like, what is the deal? Because the way he said it was as if we hadn't just spent 20 minutes talking about it, right? And I looked at him and I said, well, we just talked about this. And he said, we did?
Oh, boy.
And I'm like, whoa, right? But then he was normal, right? So then the next day it was like little peaks of like confusion, but I'm totally like, am I reading too much into this, right? Like I said something that was a figure of speech and he seemed a little confused, but I'm like, well, maybe I'm overreading it, right? Anyway, over the course of about 10 days, he just started to get more confused. And he had called his doctor to go in, regular primary care. And they said, oh, come in 3 weeks. Because when you call and you say, oh, I'm feeling a little dizzy, it doesn't seem urgent, right? I didn't take him to the ER because he wasn't passed out or having seizures. Anyway, I called the doctor and I said, look, here's the deal. Something is not right here. We can't wait 3 weeks. And explained what was going on. They said, bring him in today. The doctor said, I think, we need to get an MRI of your brain. Like, okay, MRI, fine. We go down to the MRI place. At the end of the hour waiting, they come back and they say, actually, go back upstairs now. The doctor wants to see you. Right. Before the MRI, they said, okay, we'll do this. We'll call you in 48 hours, right? I mean, I've had MRIs for knee surgeries and stuff. That's what they do, right? But so when they say at the end, oh, never mind, go upstairs right now. Something is
there's like wrong, somebody going,
right?
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. And it was after 5 o'clock.
Oh, boy.
Right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, so we go back upstairs. The doctor, and again, this is primary care. He says, there's something really wrong with your brain. I don't want to scare you. It might be glioblastoma. Meanwhile, I'm like, glioblastoma? What's glioblastoma? I never heard of glioblastoma. Right now, some people may have heard of it because more recently, John McCain died of it and Beau Biden died of it. It's gotten a little more attention in the last few years. Anyway, you need to go see the neurosurgeon tomorrow. We go to the neurosurgeon and he says, we need to do surgery the next day. So I'm like, okay, how did we go from everything was fine? We had an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old and a dog and a cat and a house, and we each had a job, and we had Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and soccer and stuff. And now we're like, boom, all of a sudden you're having brain surgery tomorrow. And, we just knew that it was a tumor at that point. We didn't know if it was cancer, what kind of tumor, all these things. Turns out it was cancerous, and glioblastoma is super aggressive. And so we had 8 months of dealing with chaos, surgeries, and complications, and cerebral spinal fluid leaking out of his brain, and all these things. And ending with hospice at home. And then he died in January of 2016. And our kids were 9 and 11 at the time.
So when you heard that he might have glioblastoma from the primary care doctor, that probably didn't mean anything to you, right? Like, a lot of people who know what that means, they're like, oh, shoot.
Yeah.
But did it mean anything to you besides just like kind of scary, maybe?
Well, it was more his demeanor and his directions. You're going to the neurosurgeon tomorrow. Normally, you're going to go to a specialist, take some time, you make some calls, they make an appointment, right? Well, when I'm like, okay, they're clearing these calendars because he's going tomorrow. Whatever it is, this is bad. I don't know what it is, right? But the other thing, I was in shock, right? So I'm sitting in the little doctor's room, and Dennis is on the table, and the doctor's on his swivel chair, and I'm sitting on the little visitor's bench, and I lean back and I close my eyes, and I look up at the ceiling. Well, look, my eyes were closed, but look up at the ceiling, and I'm like, are we really having this conversation? Like, this can't be real. Tell me that this is a joke, or that I'm not here right now, or that this is not a thing. Like, how is this a thing? Right? It did not seem real. It couldn't possibly be real, but it was. And so, 2 days later, he's having brain surgery, and he was admitted to the hospital, of course, then, but many more times, 2 more surgeries after that to fix various issues. I think there was 1 week when we were at the ER like 5 times in the same week.
They're like, hi, Dennis. You've got room for, show yourself back.
No, but the thing is, it's a different person each time, a different doctor, different nurses. Sometimes I think we went 2 days in a row, and it was like the same nurse, the same transport person, the same person at the front desk checking you in, but every time it's explaining. And then the other thing I should say is he was cognitively confused. Like I mentioned in the beginning, right? I was seeing these little signs getting progressively worse. Well, it got to the point where, we go into the ER for something, maybe, I don't know, anything. Like one time he fell off a folding chair outside, and, had to get checked out, or different stuff, right? You go in. So the doctor, of course, normally talks to the patient if the patient is an adult, right? So he says, what's going on? And so Dennis says, oh, I don't know. I think I have cancer. And the doctor says, oh, where's your cancer? And he's like, oh, well, I don't know. Maybe it's in my I forget if he said liver or lungs, whatever. He said the wrong thing, right? And I'm standing, behind him, waving my hands. Now, listeners can't see, I'm waving my hands saying, you can talk to him if you want, but if you want the real answers, you have to ask me, right? Like, so I'm like, okay. And of course, his chart in the computer was like 1 million screens long. So I had to get really good at summarizing, these are the dates of the surgeries, and this is what the neurosurgeon is, complications he's looking out for, and, all the status of everything. And yeah, it was a really crazy and difficult, and I don't even know how to describe those 8 months. And then, and I knew it wasn't going to end well, right? At the end of all that, he died.
When did you know what glioblastoma meant? At what point in time did you get home and Google it and you were like, oh no, like,
yeah,
dang.
we Googled it that first night. At that point, they were like, well, he might have glioblastoma, right?
Yeah.
And at that point, it was like, okay, the only thing we know is it's a brain tumor. Well, you never want a brain tumor of any kind. Some are more fixable than others. Some are more aggressive than others. Some have better prospects than others, right? There's different types of brain tumors. And so at that point, it might be glioblastoma. Well, it might not be, right? And so until we knew that it actually was that, there was still hope that it could be one of these other types that they could do something about.
What's that like as a mom? I mean, you're in the shock from initially finding out that there's something up. You don't know totally what it is. And that's a whole thing. Then you're a mom on top of that, and he's their dad.
Yeah. And this is one of the, I a lot of times felt paralyzed. Like, how do I, like, for the pressure of like, I know that how I handle this is going to be important, but how do I handle this? Right? Like, I know that, I need to pick the right way, but what's the right way? I need to not say the wrong thing. I need to not, mess this up further. And who can even help me know what to say? Right. And so I got some advice early on, which turned out to be helpful. A couple of things. First of all, one of my friends, her husband had died of glioblastoma a few years before. And so she told me that she'd gotten some advice early on to always be honest with the kids and make sure you tell them what you know and you tell them what you don't know. And if you don't know something, that's fine. You can tell them, we don't know, but the doctors know X and we'll know more in 3 weeks after Y happens, or, whatever, that kind of stuff. So that was really, I was glad she told me that. And then okay, he got the biopsy results back, right, from that first surgery. They biopsied it and it came back, and we had the meeting with the doctors, and they said, yes, it is cancerous. Yes, it is glioblastoma, which is a grade 4 cancer, which some other types of cancers they have in stages, like breast cancer, stage 4 is bad. Brain cancer, for some reason, it's in grades instead of stages, but grade 4 is bad.
Does it go up to like grade 12 or like undergrad degree and postdoctorate?
No, sadly, there's 4.
Shoot.
So it's like the Abraham Lincoln scale, because didn't he only go to 4th grade?
I don't know.
Okay.
Good question.
We should call it the Abraham Lincoln scale from now on. Okay. Sorry, Jenny. Keep going.
I should look into that. No, that's an interesting point. Yeah. I used to have some Abraham Lincoln biographies on my shelf, but in the course of like, you can see I've got a lot of books back here. I used to have way more books, and I had to get rid of a bunch of them, but I'm sure Google could help me with that answer, Anita. So I'll have to look into that one. So we meet with the doctor, and they say it's glioblastoma. And I say to the doctor, what's the prognosis? And she asked him if he wanted to know, and he said no. So she pulled me into the other room, and she said, well, I can't tell you how long it's going to be in his case, but the average life expectancy is 13 months. So, it could be more, it could be less. But keep in mind that the 5-year survival rate for this type of cancer is in the single digits. So it's like a bad deal. So yes, a few people survive. By the way, I have met a new friend since then who had glioblastoma 15 years ago and is still alive and doing great, like cancer-free.
What?
Yeah.
I feel like that's the only person there is.
I know.
Kind of, yeah. When you think single digit survival, right? A few people live.
Bad. Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
One of my friends had glioblastoma and ultimately died a year ago, actually, like yesterday. It was a year ago yesterday. And I remember when she was in the experimental trial phases of this stuff, she was telling me that somebody had survived glioblastoma because there was a dog heartworm medicine that somehow worked for the
Wow.
glioblastoma. So
Huh.
she was on that. And of course, it didn't work for her. But
Oh,
isn't that
interesting.
wild?
Yeah,
Wow, that's amazing that you know someone that survived it.
I do. It's crazy. But you asked me about talking to the kids. And so, I had this meeting and they said 13 months. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, gut feel is it's going to be less than that, just because he was already so confused and had so many complications. And it was just, I didn't know, right? I really didn't know. But what I did know was that it almost certainly was not going to end well, right? The end of this, however long this period was going to be, he dies and now I'm a widowed parent, right? And now I have two grieving kids, and I in effect almost became this is why I called my book Future Widow, right? Like, I knew I was going to be a widowed parent, and because he was so confused, I was immediately single parenting in effect, right? Like, I was caring for all of his medical needs and complications and running around and coordinating with doctors, doing all these things, and I was taking care of the kids myself, and the house and the dog, now with lots of help, I should say, from family and friends and tremendous people bringing food and all these kinds of things, but I was still the one doing all the parenting, right? So anyway, we had this meeting. So, taking my first friend's advice, the one I mentioned to you, I'm like, all right, well, I don't know how I'm gonna tell them. So my other friend calls me up and she says, oh, meanwhile, I should say that I had started a Caring Bridge online journal, right, to share what was happening. So I had posted on Caring Bridge, we got the biopsy back. It's glioblastoma. It was very short. I was like, I don't have the heart to explain what that is or explain that he's going to die. People can Google it. I'm out of that loop. I'm just short post. Here's the facts, right?
Tell us what Caring Bridge is for those that don't know.
Yeah, Caring Bridge is wonderful. It's not cancer specific. People generally use it for some kind of medical related crisis. If someone's in the hospital and they want to coordinate updates, like at first I thought, oh, I can text and email people with some updates. Well, it pretty quickly becomes obvious if it's not just a short, 1 day problem or whatever, you've got a lot of people near and far who would like updates. It's a free blog basically, but medically related, and you can create it and you can put a password on it or not, so you can control who can read it or not. And I was able to share out with all these people, our kids' school community, family, old friends, colleagues, near and far, right? Could keep updated. And since this was a long deal, there was a lot of people who wanted to follow along. So I had posted this update. So my friend calls me up and she says, our kid, we told our kids at dinner tonight that he had brain cancer, and they asked if he was going to die. And we didn't want to lie to them. So we said, yes, we don't know when, we don't know how long, but yes, he is going to die. And she said, oh, well, I forgot. Before she said this, she said, when are you going to tell your kids? Right. She calls me, right, to check in. When are you going to tell your kids? And I'm like, oh, I think she could tell I was hoping to avoid the whole, or at least kick it down the road. Right. And so she says, about having told their kids. And she says, the thing is, this same discussion is probably happening at dinner tables all around the school community tonight. Your kids' friends are all hearing this, or most of them are hearing this from their parents tonight. It's like, you need to talk to your kids tonight so they don't hear it on the playground tomorrow. You want them to hear from you that it is cancerous and that he is going to die. You don't want this to be news on the playground. And I was like, oh, okay, she's right. Like, I hate that. Don't tell me that, but okay, thank you for telling me that. Right?
I would have been like, kids, you can never go to school again. Don't want you to be on the playground. No contact with any of your friends. I'm not ready to have this conversation.
Right? I know. Although now, right, with social media, I guess depending on the age of the kids, there's no way to keep stuff like that from them anyway, right? So anyway, so she was right, you know, and as hard as it was, I, you know, gathered them up and I told them, and they asked some questions, and my daughter asked if he was going to live until Christmas. No. First she said, is he going to live to see me graduate? Now she was 8, right? So 10 years out. And I'm like, no, okay, no, he's not. I mean, I said it nicely, right? But the answer was no. I mean, there's no other answer. And then she said, is he going to live until Christmas? And at this point, it was probably late May or early June. And I said, I don't know. I hope so. I really don't know. And as it turned out, he lived until like 2 weeks after Christmas. It was early January. So yeah, so that was one of the hardest conversations. And I'm glad that I got that advice that I needed to tell them, because you know what, as hard as it was, it would have been worse in a week or a month or in 6 months, or if I'd waited until the week before he died and said, you know, oh, guess what? Bad news, you know, he's almost at the end of his life. I mean, obviously I would have said it nicer than that too, but I'm just abbreviating here for you guys. You know,
Jeez,
because,
Jenny.
but here's the thing, right? Like, because anytime you have to tell the kids that it's going to be terrible and awful and everybody's upset and all that. And it's worse if you have to add in, wait, but you knew about this for a month or 6 months and you didn't tell us?
Yeah.
Right? That just makes a terrible situation if worse, if that's even possible, you know?
Yeah. Well, and in widowhood in general, we're forced to do a lot of things we don't want to do. I mean, we would tap out a lot of the things if we were allowed to, but guess what? You don't get to. It's like, here's your deal, go take care of it. And that's one of those things. It's like, you have to do it. And it is not pleasant, but it's probably also helpful that they knew beforehand, so they understood more of what was happening. I think it might be more confusing for a kid to watch that treatment and to watch their parent go downhill and not be understanding, you know, what's happening and still have questions. And I'm sure it wasn't easy, but I can see how that would be helpful.
Yeah. The thing is, there was no hiding this from them. There was no, because he was so confused, and because he was, you know, periods of time away at the hospital or periods of time he was home, and then he was obviously not functioning as a 44-year-old normal human being, right? He was confused, and he wasn't doing the normal things, taking them to school or doing dad things. Like, he wasn't responsible for anything, you know? The last several months that he was here, he was in a hospital bed in the family room, you know, because that was like by the TV and by where we could have visitors, and you know, it was a good place to set up. But you know, he very clearly wasn't doing dad things, right? He, you know, all they could do with him was like, you know, sit and watch TV, which, so we did that. You know, we tried to play games, and that was, I mean, so you could pass the time, you know, a card game, you know, or a board game, a simple board game. I remember one time we played Sorry, you know, the kids' game Sorry, right? And my daughter was having to coach him through playing the way you would if you're teaching your small child how to play for the first time. And okay, now you can move your pieces here and you can roll the dice, or maybe you want to move this one or that, you know. But it was a role reversal, right? And she was so cheerful and, oh, dad, which piece do you want to move? And he's like, I don't know. Oh, dad, do you want me to help you? Yeah, right. And okay, but here's the thing. I wish I had known. I wish I had done, right? I think I was so relieved that the game kind of went okay, right? Like, everyone was pleasant. We played the game. We passed some time. You got a lot of time to kill when you're dealing with hospice at home 24/7 and every day is the same as the previous day, right? So I was pleased that 30 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever went by and nobody was upset, and it was a nice enough 30 or 40 minutes. Well, what I wish I had known, I mean, it had to have been incredibly difficult for this 8-year-old kid to be in this role reversal situation with her dad. But I didn't acknowledge that at the time. I didn't know, right? If I'd known, I would have, right? No, there was nobody to tell me these things. I was just relieved that it went okay and I didn't have to deal with any upsets. knowing what I know now, having interviewed, so many grief experts and people, right, is like, I wish I had gone back and opened that door like that evening. I wish I had said, hey, how was that for you? Thanks for helping Dad. That must have been hard. And see if she had something to say, right? She might or might not have taken the opening to talk, but just sending that message that it is okay to talk about these things, right? Because by me not saying anything, it's almost sending the message like, oh, we can't talk about these things, right? And they say that kids, like, a lot of times they're afraid of upsetting their surviving parent, and so they don't want to bring things up, and they're trying to protect, right, their surviving parent. And so if they don't bring something up, then they're struggling or suffering alone, right? And so the parent, I think, knowing that's a tendency, knowing that could be an issue, and being aware and being proactive and bringing it up and opening that door to conversation. And if they want to talk about it, then great. And if they don't want to talk about it, fine too, because it just opened that door. And I might have to open that door 20 times or 500 times, but they need to know that the door is open,
Yeah. That's so hard, because it's like you said, you're just doing the best you can in the moment, and then you can look back and beat yourself up for that, or you can be nice to yourself and pay it forward and tell the next person about it.
Yeah. Well, and so, okay, so here's, and I actually said this, I think I said this in my book, at least I meant to. I don't beat myself up about it, because I know I was doing the best that I could. And I know I had a lot on my plate, and I know I did some things right because of that advice that I got early on, to be honest with them. I never gave them the wrong information. I never lied to them and told them, oh, he'll be fine. I didn't do that. So I'm glad about that. It's just this extra piece that I know now that I wish I had known then. And that's one of the reasons I wrote this book, because I was like, I've learned a lot of things, and I know how lost and alone I felt. And if I can, some people can learn from my journey or my experience or the things that I've learned, maybe that'll be helpful to them, and they can avoid, some of these mistakes or things.
I have a question. So since you learned that after the fact, that it might have been helpful to talk to your daughter, like, as this was going on, have you guys had conversations since then? Like, since you've learned, like, what does that look like?
Yeah. It is. So that's another important point, is that it's never too late to go back and have those conversations, and even to explicitly say, you know what, I was thinking about the time we played Sorry. I'm thinking that must have been really hard for you, even if you're having that discussion a year later or 5 years later, right? Do you remember that time we played Sorry, and Dad needed so much help, and you were so helpful in coaching him? Yeah, that was weird. Yeah, it was weird, right? So, and even then to add in, like, I really wish that I had asked you about it then, and you don't have to make a huge deal about it, right? But just to acknowledge that, right? And the kid's probably going to say, it's okay, Mom, you were doing the best you could. Or they might say, yeah, I really wish you had asked me about it. And then you can say, follow it up with whatever seems logical. What do you think you would have said? Or, tell me about it now. I wish I could go back and ask you then, but, tell me now. And just kind of see where it goes. And it's never too late. The side benefit of that too is that it's modeling that adults mess things up all the time, or adults, even if this wasn't really a mess up, it wasn't optimal. It wasn't what I wish I had known or done. You can go back and fix things. People, kids, it's a good lesson for kids to learn, a good modeling for kids at any time. You can go back and right wrongs of the past, by being willing to go back and be open about it now.
Yeah, that really resonates, the idea of not just painting over and pretending like everything went exactly how you wanted it to go.
Mm.
You know, and again, it's that distinction between you don't feel guilty, but yeah, you wish that it had gone different, and you can go back and say that and not pretend like everything was exactly how I wanted it to be. You
Yeah.
know, I did the best that I could, and so I can't even try and make it better or anything like that.
Yeah, and you can even model, right? I mean, that I'm not beating myself up about this, right? You don't want to model for them that, if they screw something up, they need to be, 10 years later, like beating themselves up about something that happened 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You can, explicitly be model. Look, I did the best I could, and I'm okay with that. And I really wish I had also known X and done Y.
Yeah.
Those two things can be true. It's like a lot of things in widowhood, right? Two things can be true, and you don't have to somehow try to make them reconcile with each other.
Yeah, we talk about the and all the time. It's not but, it's and sometimes that's annoying, but that's
that's
who it is.
And that's how it is.
And that's how it is.
Uh-huh.
Did your husband he had the surgery, did he ever realize the severity or the situation that he was in? It sounds like he went downhill pretty quickly, but was there a time where he was lucid enough to realize I'm going to die?
One time in 8 months. Yeah. So mostly the answer to your question is no, and it's not because any information was kept from him. He was in every doctor's meeting. He heard every result of every scan and every doctor's comment. He was participated in everything, but then he would promptly forget, right? Like I mentioned about being in the ER and thinking he had a different type of cancer. He just would forget. And as, throughout the 8 months, his memory got worse and worse, right? So then he was even more confused. There was one time, and it was fairly early on, I think it was a month and a half, maybe into this whole deal. He was at the hospital yet again, and, inpatient. I don't know how long he was there, another week or something. And he called me on a Saturday morning, surprised me because he didn't like using the hospital phone system was complicated. Right. So I think he must have had a nurse like dial or something. I don't know. But he
dial
called
a star and then dial a 9 and then dial a 1 and then dial the number. Good luck.
Right. I know. Right. So anyway, the phone rings and it's him. And I don't even know how we got into this conversation, but he said something about being confused. And he said, I guess that's just how I am now. And I was like, ooh, maybe he gets it right now. For whatever reason, maybe he gets it. Now, I should back up and say that a different friend of mine, I had a lot of friends with a lot of great advice, right? So a different friend says, you know what? You should really get him to write cards for your kids. Like cards that you could hold on to, one for their 18th birthday or their wedding day or their graduation day or their this or that or milestones or events or whatever. He could write a whole bunch of cards for each kid. You can hold on to them and pass them out in the future. Right. And I'm like, oh, that just sounds terrible. Right. like, okay, but she's probably right. I suppose that would be a good thing. All right. But here it was the thing. Like, how am I going to pull this off? Because like he doesn't remember that he's dying. So what am I supposed to do? Tell him, by the way, write these cards because you're dying. Right. Like I just was like, oh, okay. So I had this floating around the back of my mind all this time. Like I should get him to write these cards, but how am I going to do that? So he calls on this Saturday morning and he says, I guess I'm just confused now. And I'm like, oh, maybe this is my opening. Maybe this is my chance to have him write the cards. So I sent the kids off to people's houses and I had to, because at that time, like everything was happening at the last minute. So because I didn't have any cards, right? So I'm like, swoop into Target on the way to Seattle, and all this stuff. And of course they, cards for men, all the cards either had like flowers on them where they said like, thank you or happy birthday or, like.
Oh, I wish you would have given thank you cards too.
I know, but I'm like.
Thank you that I died.
I know, right?
Happy 18th birthday.
I just like Target. I'm like, come on, where are the plain note cards for men, right? So I had to buy this 100 cards and envelopes set of like their Astro Bright, like some were, like 6 different bright color shades, and 100 cards. I'm like, what am I gonna do with 100 cards? But okay, like it's all they have. Get back in the car, drive over to Seattle. And meanwhile, I'm driving over the bridge and like with every passing mile, my level of dread is like rising, right? And I'm like, oh, this is just terrible. So I park the car. I walk over the sky bridge. I'm walking into the lobby, and my dread is like up to my almost the top of my head, right? It's just like rising up, right? I texted this different old friend of mine who was also dealing with a critically ill husband at the same time. So we've been texting back and forth. And I texted her and I said, I'm walking in to the hospital to tell Dennis that he's dying and he has to write cards to the kids. And I said, this is the hardest bleep, bleep, bleep thing I will ever have to do. Like, I was just like, my dread was just so high. But you know what else I thought in that moment? I thought, you know what? This is legit hard. Like, this is hard. This is a hard thing to suck it up and do. Like, I should remember this feeling in the future with other stuff that seems like it might be hard, quote unquote, and compare that and say, oh, that other thing's not really that hard, right? Like, what, you got to go talk to the big boss about something? Can that be harder than this? You know, right? So that was interesting. But anyway, I went up to the room and I don't even remember how I broached the subject, but somehow I was like, I brought these cards. You know, I thought you could write some cards. And I asked him, because I was always checking for understanding, right? Like, because I didn't want to assume what he did or didn't understand. So I asked him about the cards and he's like, oh yeah, they're called death and dying notes. And I'm like, what? I'm saying to myself, right? Very calm on the outside, right? Death and dying notes. Oh, so I said, oh, well, what are those? I said, oh, well, it's what you write when you only have a few months to live and you want to write notes to the people you care about. And I'm like,
Where's
whoa,
Dennis?
I know, right? And I was like, okay,
Aliens
right
have
now,
inhabited his body.
I know, right? In this moment, right now, this particular Saturday afternoon, in the hospital on this day in June, he gets it, right? And so that we had, you know, I don't know, half an hour or something to actually like talk about it. And this isn't really that much to talk about, mostly like holding hands and crying. But that was that in 8 months, that was the only opportunity to connect around, you know, the situation and the fact that he was dying and that he had this terrible cancer. And then after that, you know, his awareness again just went away as fast as it, and we'd never had another moment like that for the rest of the time.
The aliens left. They took off from the planet.
I guess so.
He ends up dying, and
Mm-hmm.
then you're left to be a single solo parent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an impossible task, right?
Mm-hmm.
When did you decide that you wanted to start a podcast on that topic?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I was casting around for a while. Like, one of the first things I did was go to Amazon and be like, okay, where's the book? I want to be a widowed parent, right? Like, where's the book that's going to tell me what to do? Someone more recently suggested, and I thought this was brilliant. It's like, you know, the what to expect when you're expecting, and what to expect the first year, and what to expect the second year,
Yeah.
like what to expect when the other parent dies. Like, they didn't write that book, right? I'm like, where's that book? I need that book. Meanwhile, I was buying all kinds of other books and reading all kinds of other books, but I was still like,
A book on Abraham Lincoln, for instance.
yeah, I got to make a note of that. I'll get back to you on that one. So I was like, all right. I felt like, you know, I was finding a lot of resources for myself as a widowed person. Like I said, I went to Camp Widow, right? I found some terrific books. Christina Rasmussen's first book I really liked. I found a therapist that I really liked. I had supportive friends and family, right? I'm not saying any of that part was easy, but I felt like there were resources I could access. There was information I could access. I could see that there was a path, right? But on the parenting thing, I felt paralyzed. Like, where's the path? What do I do? What don't I know? What do I need to know? Who can tell me what I need to know, right? And it was hard, and I felt lost, and I felt alone. And so in the course of working with my therapist over a period of time, it started out about grief, the topics, the reason why I went to her, right? I'm like, hello, my husband died, let me come talk to you, right? Eventually, talking about grief kind of became talking about life, right? Like my life, like what's next? What do I do? Where do I go? Right. And combined with the fact that I had been 20 years in a corporate IT role and wanting to make some changes, but not knowing where to go, what to do, like not wanting to just change jobs at the same kind of role, but really make some kind of fundamental change, but not knowing what that would look like. And this feeling like I want to do something with widowed parents, but what does that look like? I don't know, right? And things kind of came together where I had been working remotely for quite a long time at that point, and they basically said, we'd love to have you stay, and if so, you'll need to move back to New York, or else, see you later, your choice. And I was like, well, okay, see you later. Because right, one kid was starting high school, one kid was starting middle school, and I'm like, almost all my family is here. I'm not going to relocate across the country,
right after my husband dies, and I feel like I'm already an unmoored ship. Sure.
Yeah. Right?
Throw me into the tornado. I'll do that too.
Exactly. Right. So I'm like, okay, well, this just isn't happening. So the timing kind of came together where I was like, okay, they're laying me off, and I want to do something else with widowed parents, but what does that look like? And I started to get the idea that I could, through a podcast, I could do research and share what I was learning, right? I could stand in for my listeners and approach all these different guests and learn from them and ask questions on behalf of my listeners, and then share that out in the form of a podcast. Because, as you know, a podcast is a lot of work, right? Every widowed parent out there isn't going to go out and interview every expert and say, let me go ask all these experts, all these things. And right, it's just a ridiculous notion. But if I organized it as a podcast and I went out and asked these questions, I realized that would help me and help people like me, right? And I realized there was a need. I mean, and this was back in the fall of 2018. And so I just kind of decided to jump in and do it. And I interview, so it's a mix. Some of them are experts. So people who run grief camps, grief centers, people who write books on different pieces of all this grief related puzzle, right? So that's kind of one category, broadly speaking, the expert category. The second category is other widowed parents, probably who are several years or more out, who are reflecting on their journeys, reflecting on what they learned, what they wish they had known or done, what went well, what advice they have to share. And some of that is about advice, and some of that is about, connection, right? I mean, you guys, I'm sure, hear all the time, right? People feel less alone. They listen to other people's stories, and they, even if the other person's story is different, they still learn from them, and they feel less alone in the world. So that's the second group of people. And the third group of people, which has been fascinating, is people who are now adults, and when they were young, they lost their own parent. So they were 3 or 12 or 19 when their mom died or their dad died. And now they're 25, 35, 45, 55. I think the oldest person I've interviewed was 60, maybe. And hearing their perspectives on how that was for them has been fascinating. And I think important, because here's the thing. My kids and I, we all lost the same person. His name was Dennis, right? But I lost a spouse and they lost a parent. And it's a different relationship, right? Even though it's the exact same person. It's a different type of loss. Is one better, worse, easier, harder? No, just different. They have different, some things are easier for them, some things are easier for me, some things are harder for them, some things are harder for me. It's just, and I realized that I don't know what it's like to lose a parent at all. Actually, both my parents are still alive, but I certainly don't know what it's like to lose one when you're 9 or 11. So I realized that if I talked to people who are now adults who are willing to share, how that was for them. It's not like hearing their stories is going to exactly tell me what my kids are going through, but it puts things on my radar screen, right? And it makes me think of things I wouldn't have thought of and gives me things to be aware of and just tries to give me more perspective, right? And I think that that's just been really helpful to me as a widowed parent.
Yeah, that sounds like that would be a brilliant idea because, like you said, some of those things you probably wouldn't even have thought of, and then they bring it up and you go, oh, I didn't even realize that would be a really hard thing for a kid.
Well, an example of this, I was talking to somebody recently, I don't know where it was. A girl was learning to drive, and her dad, she was really upset about this. Her dad had died a few years back, and she was upset about learning to drive. And, my thought was, oh, okay, she always assumed that her dad would teach her. Okay, forget about the sexism in that, but whatever, right? Maybe that was the thing. Or maybe her friends' dads were teaching them and she felt like she didn't have her own dad teaching her. Or who knows what, right? But I expected something like that. Oh, my dad's not here to teach me to drive. That wasn't the problem. The problem was she was scared to death that she, as a new driver, would screw something up, cause an accident, and cause some other poor family to lose their dad.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And I didn't see that. I would never have guessed that. Of all the things I might guess of, problems or concerns about learning to drive, that wasn't on my list. So by talking to, people sharing their stories, it just, like I said, it gives me ideas and perspectives that I wasn't aware of. And I think as a parent, right, we try to understand our kids' experience, and it's not going to entirely, we can't ever be entirely in their shoes, but we can try to learn as much as we can. And so that's been helpful.
Jenny, so your podcast is the Widowed Parent Podcast. Do you only discuss parental topics, or would people that don't have kids resonate with some of your content?
It's mostly for widowed parents. My core audience is widowed parents who are still raising their kids in their teens, so babies through college age. So it's not really for people who have grown adult children or for people who don't have children. It's mostly at that. Now, is there some stuff that would be relevant to any widowed person? Sure. For example, I had a terrific discussion with Hope Edelman, who wrote Motherless Daughters a long time ago, very popular classic book. And she more recently came out with a book called The After Grief, which is really interesting. And it's kind of about the long-term experience of grief. After that first acute period, like what does grief look like in 5 years or 10 or 20 or 50 years, right? Like, so that was a little more grief in general of a topic and not really a parenting, topic. But for the most part, I designed the content around things that would be of interest to widowed parents, including, actually, I have a series that is not even grief specific, but it's with parenting experts, because, we're widowed parents, but okay, we're parents. And so we still have like regular kid stuff. And by the way, now we're the only person, right? Like we don't have that parenting partner to bounce things off of. We might have friends, we might have family members who, we can bounce things off of, but it can be different, right? So some of the, parenting experts who deal in that parenting space that is not grief specific, I also do periodically episodes with some of them, because I find, and my listeners find that really helpful too.
So Jenny, you've interviewed a ton of people. You have a podcast, you're a widowed parent, and we hear that you have written a book. Will you tell us about that?
So it's called Future Widow: Losing My Husband, Saving My Family, and Finding My Voice. And so it's a memoir. And I used as the starting point the Caring Bridge journal that I mentioned. I had 8 months worth of posts, which was like 15,000 words worth of content. It's interesting. What starts out in the beginning as like, he had surgery and he's eating and maybe he'll leave the ICU tomorrow, like very basic matter of fact kind of updates. As time went on, became reflections. I spent a lot of time. I didn't realize that, having this outlet for writing as I was living it turned out to be really helpful to me. As I was driving across the bridge or walking around, I'd be thinking about like reflections of what I might want to compose into a post. And so as we went around, went along, I was, relating events, but also adding in a lot of these reflections. And one of the things I was also trying to do was with the post was helping people understand how to help us. Like, I'm sure you guys saw this too, that as soon as you get into a situation like this, you realize like some people kind of get it and they're not afraid to talk about it, or they're not afraid to reach out, and other people don't know what to say, so they don't say anything, or it's awkward. And and so and of course I'm previous to this had been on that side myself. I don't know what to say, maybe I won't say anything, right? Well, as soon as you start seeing how all these people react, I learned a lot real fast about what was supportive and what wasn't supportive, and and all that. So I started sharing out some of that stuff too, to try to make people feel more comfortable around us. We were still running into people at school, on the soccer sidelines, at school pickup. The kids were running into people in the classroom every day, right? And part of this was a little self-interested, right? I wanted to reduce the awkwardness. I knew I was going to run into these people, and I knew it was going to be awkward, and I knew they wanted to be supportive, and then they weren't going to know what to say, and then I was going to feel like I had to make them feel better, and all these things. I'm like, if I share out what's happening and share reflections and share this kind of stuff, that can be helpful, I think, all the way around. So anyway, point being, I was feeling like, okay, I'm doing something in this widowed parenting space. I've got the podcast going, but I think there's more here. I feel like this CaringBridge journal documenting 8 months of a family's brain cancer journey, for lack of a better word, there's just something here, right? But I didn't know how to turn it into a book. I didn't just want it to be like, this happened, the end. Because first of all, that'd be a boring thing to read. Secondly, if that was the book, I would just publish the CaringBridge journal, right? Like, I already published it all, a bunch of little installments. I could just pull it all together and, publish it. There's got to be more here. So I started combining it with the things I was learning from the podcast and reflecting on the things I wish I had known or done, some of the things we've already talked about, and adding in reflections. And so I go through, the middle part of the book is based on the CaringBridge stuff. And there's the first part and the end part. But some of it is like adding in, hey, when this was happening, I wasn't ready to talk about this. Let me tell you now what was happening behind the scenes. Some of it is I wish I had known this. Knowing what I know now of all the people I've interviewed, if I had handled the game of sorry differently, then, I would have done it this way and it would have had this benefit, that kind of stuff. But I was really struggling with, where does the book end? I'm like, does it end when he dies? Because that would be one place where it could end. That's where the CaringBridge ends, but ends shortly after he dies. But I realized there was more to the story than that, because he died is not the end of my story. That wasn't a very grammatically correct sentence, but you know what I mean. His death is not the end of my story, right? I can't change the fact that he died. There's no magic wand in the world that will undo that. So what's next for me, right? And so then the third part of the book continues then with that aspect. So it just came out earlier this year. I'm very excited about it. I've had great feedback from people. It's especially nice to hear from people who are widowed, who have said it was helpful in some way to them. They learned something about children's grief. They learned something that applied to themselves and their own grief or their own perspective. Also people who are not widowed, but, said, wow, I have a friend going through cancer, or a friend whose husband just died, and now I have a better idea how to support them as a good ally, right? That kind of thing too. So yeah, it's been really exciting to see it. Well, I can say now that it's been exciting to see it in the world, but I tell you, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many times I almost pulled the plug on this. Mm-hmm. Like this vulnerability thing. Like, of course I should have known. And of course, I guess I knew that memoir is a vulnerable genre, if you would have asked me, I would have said, sure, memoirs vulnerable, fine, whatever.
But it's you this time.
I know.
You should have gone with comic book. I've heard that's way less vulnerable.
No, because I can't draw to save my life.
Never mind.
Yeah, no. No. In fact, there was so many, because I have a second book I'm working on, which is the Widowed Parent Handbook, and that's more the nonfiction book, right? And memoir is nonfiction too, but it's a story, and it's my story, right? A nonfiction book that's like information feels more manageable to me.
Yeah, it's more clinical. Right? It's more separate.
Yeah, and there'll still be stories and there'll still be stuff, but it just, I don't know, feels a little less vulnerable. And so that's going to be based on the podcast work and stuff that I'm doing. That'll be in that book. But this book, I was like, I should start with this. This is my story. It sets me up to, the work I'm doing with the podcast and the stuff, right? This is how I got to this book. Is how I got to where I am. Like, why am I here doing this? Well, that's the story. And what was my point? Oh, launch was getting closer and closer, and I was like, oh, I can't do this. Like, this is just not like, oh, maybe I can, cancel the whole thing. And even like, I called up my writing accountability buddy, and I'm like, is this going to help anybody anyway? Like, why am I doing this? Like, maybe I'm putting all this work and all this stuff, and it's not going to help anybody anyway. So just forget the whole thing. And she's like, are you kidding me? And of course she parrots back to me everything. I'm like, okay, well, you're right. Fine. Like, yes, I agree. I'm just freaking out. And I was like, vulnerability. Okay, what do you think of when you think of vulnerability? You think of Brene Brown.
Yeah.
So I went on Amazon and I downloaded the audiobook for, I think it was the one with the men in the arena, Dare to Lead.
Daring Greatly.
Daring Greatly, that's the one. Yeah, Daring Greatly. I downloaded that audiobook and I'm like, if I don't listen to this whole entire book this afternoon, I might just pull the plug on this whole project. So I binged and listened to that and I was like, okay, I guess we can go ahead. I guess I won't pull the plug. In fact, I need to send Brene Brown. I know, right?
Brene got you through.
I know. I need to send her a signed copy or something, because I tell you, if it wasn't for that book at that moment, I might have pulled the plug on it. So now that it's out, I can be like, oh yeah, this is great. But it's memoir is hard.
Well, I'm glad that you stuck with it and that Brene helped you to get through that, because like you were saying, there's just maybe not enough help for the widows. The poor widows need the help in the form of books. So, the more that we can add to that collection, because, some people might not resonate with a certain book. And so if there's other options, then that's nice to be able to have those options and to look for something that's really going to help you in your situation and your style of grief and, all of those things. So,
but for those who maybe haven't gone through it, they can gain some empathy because they'll learn about other stories that are different than they are.
Yeah, that's true.
Good job, Jenny.
Thank you.
And Jenny has graciously agreed to do a giveaway for one of her books. So keep your eyes out on social media for that. And we will have a way to enter to win a book, because you want one, because Jenny's amazing. So.
Well, thank you. I look forward to hearing who the winner is, and I will sign it and drop it in the mail to them right away. So that'll be very exciting, and I'd love to hear what they think about it.
We have one more very important question for you, Jenny.
Okay.
This is
most important.
Very, very serious.
This is the make or break it.
Oh, no. What is it?
What is your favorite cheese?
Oh, okay.
Did David warn you that was coming?
No, but I love cheese.
Yes.
Okay, good. So yeah. Well, my favorite cheese that I just mostly eat regularly would be Camembert.
Really?
Does that surprise you?
Yes.
Nobody ever says Camembert.
Our most popular is Gouda, smoked Gouda.
Smoked Gouda.
Oh, no. I like the...
No.
Well, I mean, it's fine. I don't object to smoked Gouda, but the Camembert, and spread it on a baguette. But so Dennis and I went to France in, I don't know, pre-kids, right? And Paris, and they have, the cheese shops and the bread shops and the stuff. And we learned about this cheese called Époisse. And it's like Epoisses or something crazy. I don't speak French. Anyway, it's pronounced Époisse or something like that. And it's this like it's super stinky. It's like if you've got brie and then you got camembert is more flavorful than brie, and then a poisse is like 100 times as flavorful as camembert and as stinky as camembert. It's right, but it's just really good. But I think it's like a raw something. So it was like supposedly
it's raw porcupine milk.
Ew.
It's from the milk of the porcupine.
How do you milk a porcupine? Can we just talk about that? That's all I want to know.
I believe they only do it in France, and so you have to be French to know.
Okay.
Well, that could be. Who knows? Supposedly it was illegal here, and then I found it in a cheese shop in New York when we lived in New York for a while, and then I always wondered if that cheese shop was a little sketchy, but then
it's a black market.
Yeah,
cheese.
because milking porcupines is illegal in the U.S.
Right?
Everybody knows that.
Silly.
But then I found a version of it here in a grocery store like once or twice, and I wonder if it might have been a modified, like a pasteurized, like a not a knockoff, but like not as good as the real French stuff.
US, yeah,
right. So, but I bought it because it was super exciting anyway. So anyway, I usually can't find that. So camembert is my go-to. In fact, maybe I will get some on my next trip because this is making me hungry.
Okay, we'll write you down for camembert. We're doing a very unofficial poll.
Okay.
Now I told you, Mel.
All right.
We weren't before, but now we
right.
are. We've got one vote for camembert.
Just one.
Well, okay. Let me know if you get another one because it's the best.
Yes. Okay. We'll be sure to tell you.
All right.
Jenny, we want to thank you for giving us your time and interviewing with us. We're super excited to give away one of your books and to share your podcast. If any of our listeners are parents, of course, you've already checked out her podcast. But if you haven't, then, go check it out. I'm assuming, Jenny, that it's on the places that you find podcasts.
Wherever you're listening to this one right now, you can also find the Widowed Parent Podcast, and my website, widowedparentpodcast.com, will take you to everything as well.
All places.
Yeah.
And then the book, I'm assuming, can be found on Amazon?
The book is also everywhere. And so actually, if you go to futurewidowbook.com, I've got links to all the stores. So if you want to go Amazon, Barnes & Noble, indie bookstore, ebook, all those things.
Do you get more money if they buy it directly from you?
A little bit, yes.
Okay.
Do that
directly from Jenny because she's a poor widow.
Support creators,
Yes.
Everybody.
Yeah,
Support the poor
absolutely.
widow.
In fact, I've got signed copies available on my store as well. Not on Amazon, of course, but of course, Amazon will give you the Prime shipping. It'll be here in no time, so that's a good way to go as well.
Okay, excellent. And remember to check out the Patreon. It's patreon.com/WWDN.
If you want to buy us tacos, go to buymeacoffee.com/widowwedonoww.
Check out the Widow Wives Club. Make sure you answer all the questions. Yes, all of them, including the group rules.
Don't get mad at us.
And we'd love to see you in there. And until we get to talk to you again, I'm Anita.
I'm Mel.
And I'm Jenny.
We're just two young widows with a podcast and one young widow with an actually helpful podcast, ? And we're trying to figure out...
Widow we do
now. This is my favorite thing to discuss with you.
Tell me, what is it?
One of my favorite things. I do enjoy tacos and cheese and dogs. This is about how you cannot pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a phone plan, especially when you're a widow, your person is dead, you might have kids, you might need another option, and you just want your phone to work, you want unlimited texting and service, and you want it to be like $25 a month.
It blows my mind that they have plans that start at $15 a month. That is so cheap. And the cool thing is it uses other 5G networks, and so you don't have to pay extra for that, and you still get great service.
Yep, Anita and I have traveled all over, and I have used my phone. So I highly recommend it, and my mom's even on it. When my dad died, we put his phone down to the cheapest plan, which is $15 a month. And I think my mom's on the $20 a month plan, and it's so worth it. It's so much cheaper than what we were all paying before. So I highly recommend it if you're on a budget or not. Who cares? Ryan Reynolds is in charge of the company, and they send you free stickers with Ryan Reynolds temporary tattoos. It's kind of the best. So if somebody wants to sign up, what can they do, Anita?
Go to trymintmobile.com/WWDN. Seriously, you guys. Such a great idea. Save yourself some money.
And if you're worried about losing data or having any changes with your phone, not going to happen. They walk you through it. Everything's fine. It's the easiest process. of all time. Again, that's
TryMintMobile.com/WWDN.